Primordial cosmic forces. Primordial cosmic forces in Stephen King's universe sit way above normal horror rules. These are reality-level problems, not things you lock in a basement and forget about. It, or Pennywise, is the perfect example. It comes from the Macroverse and settles under Derry like it signed a long-term lease. It sleeps for about 27 years, wakes up, watches the town closely, and picks off whoever looks easiest to scare. Fear matters because scared people are easier to control, which is why kids get hunted first, and adults usually end up getting nudged, tricked, or pushed into helping without realizing it. Then there's the Crimson King, who doesn't bother with small stuff. He corrupts entire worlds, turns people into pawns, and goes straight for the Dark Tower, the thing holding all realities together. His damage doesn't explode right away. It spreads slowly and just keeps getting worse. On the other side of that mess is Maturin, an ancient guardian of the beams who keeps things balanced by stepping in quietly and rarely. And once you get past the big cosmic beings, the situation somehow gets worse, because next are the creatures directly tied to the Dark Tower. The ones poking at the beams and speeding up the whole collapse. Dark Tower aligned entities. Dark Tower aligned creatures are the ones actually messing with the fate of all realities, not just hanging around spooky houses or scaring a few unlucky people. The Crimson King is basically the multiverse's main problem. He's always in the background, pulling strings, corrupting worlds, and working toward tearing down the Dark Tower, which is the thing holding every universe together. If the tower falls, everything else goes with it. And that's exactly the outcome he's aiming for. Then there are the low men, sometimes called Cantoi, who handle the hands-on work. They show up in their yellow coats, move quietly through different worlds, hunt down psychic people, and clean up messes for the Crimson King. They're not flashy, just unsettling, which somehow makes them worse. And somewhere between annoyingly creepy and actual nightmare is Dandolo, a psychic predator who hangs out in a lonely house and feeds on emotions. He feels harmless at first, which is the trick. Together, these creatures show how destruction in King's universe usually isn't loud or sudden. It's slow, coordinated, and very intentional. Interdimensional predators. Stephen King created interdimensional predators, which are basically the monsters that refuse to stay in their own lane. One world is never enough for them. The Outsider does this in the most annoying way possible. It copies a person perfectly, commits something awful, then just hangs out nearby, feeding on all the grief and confusion it caused. Once everyone is broken enough, it leaves. Not because it feels bad, because the job's done. Tak is way sloppier. It comes through weak spots between worlds, can't survive on its own, and starts borrowing bodies like disposable tools. Animals, people, it doesn't matter. Hosts fall apart fast, so it just jumps again and keeps wrecking everything around it. And then there's it when it's actively hunting. At that point, it's not stuck under Derry anymore. It moves through fear itself, memories, thoughts, whatever door happens to be open. These things don't travel normally. They just show up wherever the situation looks bad enough to eat. Possessors and body hijackers. Possessors and body hijackers in Stephen King's world are the monsters that don't just kill you and move on. They take you over like you're a car they borrowed without asking. This is also one of those overlap categories, because Tak and the Outsider fit here too, even though they are initially in the interdimensional predator category. Tak is one of the clearest examples of body hijacking in King's universe. It comes through some weak spot between realities, and jumps into whatever living body is nearby, because it can't make one of its own here. Once inside, that host body starts falling apart fast, but Tak doesn't care, and just moves on to the next one until everything around it is wrecked. Then there's the Outsider, which does a smoother version of the same thing. Instead of tearing through bodies, it copies someone perfectly. Their blood, fingerprints, the whole deal, and walks around wearing their life while quietly destroying it from the inside. And in Dreamcatcher, you get the alien parasites, often called Virus or Ripley, which infect people internally, mess with their minds, and use the host to keep spreading. Sometimes the body lasts a while, sometimes it really doesn't. Either way, the theme is the same. The horror isn't dying, it's losing control while something else takes the wheel. Fear feeders and emotion predators. Monsters that feed on fear, pain, or despair are some of the most unsettling things in Stephen King's universe, because they're patient and calculated. They don't rush toward violence, they wait for emotions to do the heavy lifting. Pennywise plays that similar game over decades, and targets kids easily because their emotions hit harder. And by the time anything physical happens, the damage is already done. Then there's Dandolo, who takes a quieter approach. He creates a safe and friendly space, tells stories, makes people feel comfortable, and slowly drains the emotion from them. Nothing feels threatening at first, which is exactly why it works. And in Needful Things, Leland Gaunt barely has to do anything himself. He nudges people toward jealousy and resentment, lets the town tear itself apart, and feeds on the fallout. These monsters survive because emotions keep them well fed. Human-born monsters. Human-born monsters are some of Stephen King's scariest, because there's no spell, curse, or creature involved. Things just go wrong, and nobody stops them in time. Carrie White grows up getting bullied at school and controlled at home, with zero room to breathe. All that pressure keeps stacking up, and when her powers finally show up, it feels less like a twist and more like the inevitable breaking point. Jack Torrance is the kind of guy who thinks a fresh start will fix everything. It doesn't. He brings his anger, addiction, and bad habits with him, and the isolation just lets those problems grow unchecked. Watching Jack fall apart feels like watching someone slowly talk themselves into disaster. Then there's Annie Wilkes, who somehow stays calm the entire time, which honestly makes her worse. She's friendly, helpful, and totally sure she's doing the right thing. Her obsession slowly turns into control, then into straight-up cruelty, and she never thinks she's crossed the line. Psychic and power mutates. Psychic and power mutates are people who wake up one day and realize their brain did something weird, and suddenly it has consequences. Some of them, like the kids in The Shining, are born with what's called the Shining, which lets them pick up thoughts, see stuff others can't, and even send messages telepathically. Danny Torrance, for example, not only sees ghosts in the Overlook Hotel, but he can also talk to people through their minds and sense things happening far away. A few decades later, in Dr. Sleep, his shine shows up again, but this time, it's a resource that others want to take. The True Knot are a group of almost immortal psychics who feed on the steam that children with shining produce when they suffer. They travel the country looking for people like Danny or Abra Stone, whose psychic light is strong enough to keep them alive longer. Another example is Firestarter, where the psychic ability goes in a different direction. Pyrokinesis. Charlie McGee can start fires with her mind, and that makes her valuable, hunted, and terrifyingly powerful, in ways no normal human should be. And once power like this exists, it doesn't just live in people. Next up are the cursed objects, the things that carry evil with them, and pass it on to anyone unlucky enough to touch them. Cursed objects. Once you get past powers living inside people, King starts having fun with objects instead, which is somehow worse. These are normal things that should sit quietly on a shelf and behave, but instead they ruin lives just by existing. Christine is the best example. She's a car with a personality, a temper, and a very strong opinion about who's allowed to touch her. She fixes herself, hunts anyone who disrespects her, and treats jealousy like a built-in feature. Then there's the monkey, a harmless-looking wind-up toy that claps its cymbals and somehow manages to line that up with someone dying every single time. You don't use it, you don't stop it, and you definitely don't keep it around unless you enjoy bad outcomes. Needful Things takes the idea even further. The objects in that shop aren't deadly on their own, but they poke at people's worst instincts. Jealousy, resentment, and ego do the rest. By the time the town realizes what's happening, the damage is already done. Cursed places. Stephen King has a legendary way of describing cursed places. These are the kinds of spots that look totally normal at first, but they end up completely messing with your head and your soul the moment you step inside. Take the Overlook Hotel. On paper, it is just a massive empty resort tucked away in the mountains. But as soon as the Torrance family moves in, things get weird fast. They start seeing creepy visions and hearing voices, almost as if the building is studying their deepest fears, just to use those secrets against them. It really feels like the hotel is alive, watching everyone and waiting for them to slowly lose their minds. Room 1408 is just as bad, but it is more like pure horror squeezed into one tiny hotel room. A skeptic checks in, thinking the haunted rumors are fake, but the room immediately starts warping reality. It messes with time and creates terrifying hallucinations to push guests into a total panic. Most people do not even last an hour in there, and the ones who do make it out are usually changed forever. Then there is the town of Derry, which is an entire community where evil has been brewing for generations. Terrible things happen there that simply do not make sense, and the whole place feels like a magnet for tragedy and horror. It is exactly that heavy, cursed atmosphere that allows a monster like Pennywise to thrive for so long. Plagues, hive minds, and mass corruption. Imagine a threat that spreads like a wildfire, or a bad idea, making everyday life feel incredibly fragile. This is something that happens a lot in these stories, where the danger is not just one monster, but something that everyone can catch. In The Stand, everything starts with a superflu that escapes a government lab and wipes out almost the entire world. You do not need to be bitten or cursed to get sick. Just breathing near the wrong person causes entire communities to vanish and civilization to collapse. The Tommyknockers takes a weirder turn when a buried alien ship slowly corrupts a whole town. People start acting bizarre, and building strange gadgets as their minds and bodies warp into something not quite human. Then there is Cell, where a mysterious phone signal turns callers into violent, hive-minded attackers the second they answer a call. Forget the lone monster in the dark. The real terror is how Stephen King showed that a simple thing like a phone signal can turn everyone around you into a nightmare. Classic monsters, King variants. In Stephen King's universe, you'd also find that he loves taking classic monsters and giving them a weird and fresh twist. In Salem's Lot, he starts with traditional vampires but lets them overrun an entire town. It is not just a few victims. The infection spreads so fast that even the daylight starts to feel creepy. Then you have the zombies from Pet Sematary. These are not your typical slow-moving movie monsters. When a father brings his son back to life using a cursed burial ground, the boy returns as something hollow and violent. It is way scarier because the person looks the same, but the soul is totally gone. He even plays around with werewolves and other famous creatures, but he always makes them feel off. It is like he takes a monster you already know and shows you how much worse it gets when it is lurking in a small town. These stories prove he can take any old horror idea and turn it into something brand new and totally unsettling. Existential/conceptual horrors. Sometimes Stephen King skips monsters entirely and goes straight for ideas that are way harder to deal with. This is the stuff you can't punch, escape, or outsmart, because it's baked into life itself. Revival is a good example. It starts off small and almost normal, then slowly drifts into a place where you're forced to think about what comes after death. And the answer, when it finally shows up, is not comforting at all. It's the kind of ending that sticks with you because you can't unknow it once you've seen it. Then there's The Long Walk, which sounds simple on paper and feels brutal in practice. A group of boys walks. If they stop, they die. There's no trick, no monster waiting at the end. Just exhaustion, fear, and the slow realization that the system doesn't care how hard you try. This is where King's horror gets very quiet and very personal. It's about inevitability, loss, and being trapped in situations that don't offer a way out, which is often scarier than anything with claws. And the wild part is, a lot of this might not just be a coincidence. Over the years, fans have connected these monsters, places, and events into theories that Stephen King later confirmed were actually true. If you want to see which theories ended up being right, check out every Stephen King theory that turned out to be true explained.